Claim me human, or I will be lost forever.
The twin suns of Ophrona blazed high in the alien sky, their relentless light transforming the sprawling dunes into an ocean of molten gold. Waves of heat shimmered in the distance, distorting the horizon into a hazy mirage. Caleb adjusted the brim of his worn hat, its faded leather doing little to shield him from the punishing heat. His boots crunched against the coarse sand as he trudged forward, guided by the soft hum of his handheld scanner. "Don't let me down," he muttered under his breath, eyes fixed on the blinking light on the device's display. It indicated salvage, a rare find on a planet as remote as Ophrona. A shipwreck, perhaps. With luck, it would be one of the ancient kinds, packed with artifacts or tech that could fetch enough credits to keep him moving for another few months. He lived for these moments, the thrill of discovery, the promise of reward. As he crested a towering dune, his breath hitched. There it was, the shattered remains of a ship, half buried in the sand like the fossilized skeleton of some long-forgotten beast. Its once sleek hull, a brilliant chrome in its prime, was now dull and scarred, bearing the telltale marks of a violent crash. The ship's insignia, a swirling geometric pattern, was unmistakable. A Valiacer. "Jackpot," Caleb muttered, his lips curving into a smirk. Sarian technology was advanced and fiercely protected. Anything salvageable here could make him a very rich man, or a dead one if the wrong people found out. He slid down the dune, his boots sinking into the shifting sand, and approached the wreck cautiously. The air grew heavy as he neared, a strange energy prickling at his skin. It wasn't unusual for alien wrecks to carry residual power or radiation, but this felt different. He couldn't place it. His hand hovered over the blaster at his hip as he circled the ship, scanning for signs of movement. And then he saw her. At first he thought it was a trick of the light. A figure lay slumped in the shadow of the wreck, her silver mute skin shimmering faintly beneath the relentless suns. She was bound, her wrists and ankles shackled with gleaming metal chains that reflected the fiery light like mirrors. Her form was delicate, almost ethereal, her long hair cascading around her like liquid starlight. Caleb froze, his instincts screaming at him to tread carefully. "Hey!" he called out, his voice rough from the dry air. "You alive?" The figure stirred. Slowly she turned her head toward him, her golden eyes blinking open. They locked onto him with a sharp intensity that made his breath catch. She tried to push herself up, but the chains clinked ominously, holding her down. "Help me," she rasped, her voice low and melodic, though it trembled with exhaustion. Caleb didn't move. His fingers tightened on the grip of his blaster as he scanned the area. This had all the makings of a trap. Injured alien, vulnerable and alone. Perfect bait for a scavenger with more curiosity than sense. "Who did this to you?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. She swallowed hard, her lips cracked from dehydration. "The elders," she whispered. "They cast me out." Her words hung in the air, foreign yet weighted with meaning. She tugged weakly at the chains. "Please, human, if you do not free me, I will be lost." "Lost," Caleb echoed, his brow furrowing. She closed her eyes briefly, as if summoning the strength to explain. "I am Sarian," she said, her voice steadier now, though it was tinged with desperation. "We are bound to the life stream, the flow of the universe itself. Without it, we are nothing, cast out, untethered. I am already fading." Caleb crouched, his gaze narrowing as he studied her. "And what's with this untethered business? You look plenty alive to me." Her golden eyes flared with frustration. "You do not understand. Without a mate, I cannot be whole. It is our way. I need someone to claim me, or I will vanish. My spirit—" Caleb snorted, the corner of his mouth tugging upward in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me. You're telling me that unless someone bonds with you or whatever, you'll just cease to exist?" "Yes," she said, her voice deadly serious. "Please, claim me human, or I will be lost forever." The words hit him like a gust of hot wind. Caleb shifted uncomfortably, his hand running through his sweat-dampened hair. This wasn't the kind of trouble he signed up for. Relationships, human or otherwise, were messy, complicated. The last thing he needed was to be dragged into some alien ritual, let alone play the part of a cosmic savior. "Look," he said, gesturing to the chains. "I can break you out of those, but claiming you, mating with you, that's a whole other—" Her expression darkened, her desperation turning to despair. "If you leave me here, I will die." Something in her tone made him pause. He'd heard that kind of desperation before, seen it in the eyes of people who'd lost everything. Caleb wasn't a hero, but he wasn't heartless either. He cursed under his breath. "All right," he said finally, "I'll help you. But let's get one thing straight. I'm not signing up to be your mate. First, we're figuring out why your own people decided to chain you up and leave you for dead." Her eyes softened, a faint glimmer of hope returning to them. "You? You would do this? Don't make me regret it," he said, pulling a multi-tool from his belt. He worked quickly, the tools sparking against the chains until they snapped, one by one. When the final shackle fell, she slumped forward, her weight catching him off guard. Her body was lighter than he expected, fragile yet radiating an otherworldly warmth. He steadied her, his grip firm but gentle. "Oh, what's your name?" he asked as he helped her to her feet. "Zara," she said softly, her gaze meeting his. "And you?" "Caleb," he said, his voice gruff. "Let's move before someone else decides to drop by." As the twin suns dipped toward the horizon, painting the dunes in hues of crimson and violet, Caleb guided Yevara away from the wreck. He had no idea what he'd just gotten himself into, but one thing was clear. His quiet, solitary life had just been shattered, and as he glanced at the enigmatic woman beside him, he couldn't shake the feeling that his path was about to take him far beyond the deserts of Afrana, farther than he'd ever imagined. The desert night wrapped itself around them like a velvet shroud, the relentless heat of the twin suns giving way to a biting chill. Stars blanketed the sky, unspoiled by atmosphere or city lights, their cold brilliance illuminating the dunes in a ghostly silver glow. Caleb pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders as he walked beside Yevara, who moved with the hesitant, uneven steps of someone unaccustomed to freedom. She had said little since they left the wreck, her golden eyes scanning their surroundings with a mix of wonder and unease. The faint clink of her broken chains, now looped around her waist as makeshift armor, was the only sound besides their footsteps. Caleb felt the weight of her silence and his own uncertainty. He didn't like walking blind into a situation, and this whole mess had bad idea written all over it. "You doing all right back there?" he asked, breaking the quiet. Yevara looked up, startled, as if she'd been pulled from some deep reverie. "I am unsteady," she admitted, her voice softer than before. "The life stream feels distant here. It is strange." Caleb furrowed his brow. "Still don't get this whole life stream thing. You keep talking about it like it's some kind of energy field." She tilted her head, considering him for a moment. "It is not something you see or touch, human. It is something you feel. It connects all Sarians, our souls bound to one another and to the universe itself. Without it, we are adrift, alone." Her voice caught on the last word, and she glanced away. "But why your people dumped you in the middle of nowhere, cut you off from this connection?" he pressed. Her shoulders stiffened, and for a moment he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her words were brittle, like glass on the verge of shattering. "They believe I am a threat. I was accused of betraying my clan, of violating the sacred bond, but I did no such thing. I would never." Caleb stopped walking and turned to face her. "You're saying they framed you?" Viara nodded, the anguish in her expression cutting deeper than words. "Yes, someone twisted the truth, manipulated the elders, and now I am cast out, stripped of my place in the life stream." She took a shaky breath. Without a mate to reclaim me, I will fade. Caleb stared at her, weighing her words. Her desperation was genuine, that much was clear. But this whole situation reeked of something more, something bigger. He didn't trust her yet, not fully, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more at play than she realized. "Well," he said finally, "then we're going to figure out who did this to you. If someone set you up, there's got to be proof somewhere." Her eyes widened, a flicker of hope breaking through her despair. "You would do this for me?" Caleb sighed, adjusting the strap of his pack. "Guess I've got a thing for lost causes." A faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind him why he'd decided to help her in the first place. Something about Ivara, her fragility paired with an undeniable strength, stirred something in him he hadn't felt in a long time. They walked through the night, the cold biting deeper as the hours stretched on. Caleb kept his blaster within easy reach, his eyes scanning the dunes for any sign of movement. The desert was treacherous, even without bounty hunters or hostile creatures. Ivara walked silently beside him, her steps growing steadier as they went. Despite her ethereal appearance, she moved with a quiet resilience that impressed him. She didn't complain about the cold or the endless expanse of sand. She simply followed his lead, trusting him in a way that felt both humbling and disconcerting. As the first hints of dawn brushed the horizon, they reached the edge of the dunes. Before them stretched a jagged canyon, its walls carved by centuries of wind and time. Caleb paused, surveying the landscape. "This canyon leads to an old trading post," he said. "Might be abandoned, might not. Either way, we can rest there." Ivara nodded, her gaze lingering on the canyon walls. "There is something here," she said softly. Caleb frowned. "What do you mean?" She closed her eyes, her brow furrowing in concentration. "The life stream is faint, but it flows through this place. It feels ancient." "Great," Caleb muttered. "Ancient usually means trouble." They descended into the canyon, the air growing cooler and heavier as they moved deeper. The walls loomed high above them, casting long shadows that danced with the shifting light of dawn. The faint sound of rushing water echoed through the canyon, a rare and welcome sign of life in the barren desert. As they rounded a bend, Caleb froze. His hand shot up, signaling Ivara to stop. Ahead of them, a group of figures moved among the rocks, their shapes indistinct in the early light. "Bounty hunters." "Stay behind me," he whispered, drawing his blaster. Ivara's hand brushed his arm. "There are too many," she murmured. "We cannot fight them." "Don't plan to," he said, his eyes narrowing. "We're gonna outsmart them." The bounty hunters hadn't spotted them yet, their attention focused on scanning the terrain. Caleb motioned for Ivara to follow him as he crept toward a narrow side path. They moved quickly but silently, their footsteps muffled by the soft sand. When one of the bounty hunters turned in their direction, Caleb's heart leapt into his throat. He pressed Ivara against the canyon wall, holding his breath as the figure scanned the area. Seconds stretched into eternity before the hunter turned away. Once they were clear, Caleb exhaled slowly. "That was too close." Ivara's gaze met his, her golden eyes filled with gratitude and something else. Trust. "You risked yourself for me," she said quietly. Caleb shrugged. "Couldn't exactly let you get captured." Still, her words lingered as they continued through the canyon. For someone who'd spent most of his life looking out for himself, it felt strange, unnerving even, to have someone rely on him like this. They reached the trading post just as the sun crested the canyon walls. The settlement was little more than a cluster of crumbling buildings, their walls weathered by sand and time. Caleb scanned the area before motioning for Ivara to follow him inside one of the larger structures. It was empty save for a few broken crates and a dusty table. Caleb set his pack down and gestured for Ivara to sit. "We'll rest here for a bit, then we figure out our next move." She nodded, her expression thoughtful as she sank onto the table's edge. Thank you, Caleb. He glanced at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. For what? For not leaving me, she said simply. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He didn't reply, instead busying himself with checking his supplies. But as he worked, he couldn't shake the thought that Yvara's gratitude wasn't just for his help. It was for something deeper, something he wasn't ready to confront just yet. And as he watched her sitting there, fragile but unbroken, Caleb realized that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't either. The morning sun slanted through the cracks in the walls of the dilapidated trading post, casting long, jagged shadows across the dusty floor. Caleb crouched by the doorway, his blaster resting on his knee as he scanned the canyon for any sign of movement. The bounty hunters from the night before had been close, too close, and his instincts told him they wouldn't give up so easily. Behind him, Yvara sat on a makeshift seat made of a broken crate, her posture unusually still. Her golden eyes, vibrant even in the dim light, stared into the distance, as if seeing something far beyond the physical world. She had been quiet all morning, her silence weighing heavily on the air between them. "We can't stay here long," Caleb said, breaking the quiet. "They'll figure out where we went." Yvara didn't respond immediately. Her focus remained fixed, her lips moving in a barely audible whisper. Caleb tilted his head, his curiosity overriding his usual caution. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low but edged with curiosity. "I am listening," she said after a pause, her tone distant. "The life stream is faint here, but it whispers to me. It carries echoes of truth." Caleb frowned, leaning against the doorframe. Echoes of truth. That sounds a lot like riddles to me." She glanced at him, a faint smile softening her features. "To you, perhaps, but to me it is a guide. If I can attune myself to it, I may uncover the truth behind my exile." "Right," Caleb muttered, folding his arms. "While you're busy listening to whispers, I'm going to figure out how we're getting out of here alive." They left the trading post before the sun climbed too high, the heat of the day already beginning to bake the canyon floor. Caleb led the way, his pace brisk but cautious. Yvara followed close behind, her chains clinking softly with each step. The narrow path they followed twisted and turned, the walls of the canyon pressing close around them like the ribs of some ancient beast. "Where are we headed?" Yvara asked, her voice breaking the long silence. "There's a Sarian shrine not far from here," Caleb replied, glancing over his shoulder. "Or at least, that's what the old maps say. If we're lucky, it hasn't been completely scavenged yet." "A shrine?" Yvara's voice held a note of intrigue. "Why there?" "Because shrines usually mean records," Caleb said simply. "If someone framed you, there's a chance the truth is buried in those records, or at least something that'll point us in the right direction." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You are resourceful, human." "Caleb," he corrected her. "And yeah, it's kind of my thing." Her faint smile returned, but it quickly faded as the sound of distant voices reached them. Caleb froze, motioning for Yvara to stay silent. He crouched low, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the path ahead. The voices grew louder, accompanied by the distinct crunch of boots on gravel. Caleb's pulse quickened. He motioned for Yvara to follow him off the path into the cover of a narrow alcove. They pressed themselves against the cool stone, the shadows concealing them as a group of bounty hunters came into view. There were 4 of them, heavily armed and dressed in mismatched armor that bore the marks of countless battles. They moved with the confidence of seasoned trackers, their eyes scanning the canyon walls with practiced precision. One of them, a hulking figure with a scar across his jaw, carried a device that emitted a soft, rhythmic ping. "They've got a tracker," Caleb whispered, his breath brushing against Yvara's ear. "Must have keyed it to your life stream or something." Yarva's eyes widened, a flicker of panic breaking through her calm exterior. "They can sense me?" "Seems like it," Caleb muttered. "Which means we need to lose them fast." The bounty hunters paused, their leader holding up a hand. The group stopped, scanning the area intently. Caleb held his breath, his hand hovering over his blaster. He glanced at Ivara, her expression tense but resolute. The leader barked an order in a guttural language, and the group moved on, their footsteps fading into the distance. Caleb waited until he was sure they were gone before stepping out of the alcove, his blaster still drawn. "We need to move," he said, his voice firm. "Fast." The shrine was nestled in a hidden alcove at the far end of the canyon, its entrance obscured by a tangle of alien vines that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. Caleb pushed through the foliage, revealing a doorway carved into the stone. Intricate Sarian symbols adorned the archway, their meaning lost on him, but unmistakably ancient. Yavara stepped forward, her fingers brushing against the carvings, her eyes filled with wonder and something deeper. Reverence. "This place," she murmured, "it is sacred." "Sacred or not, it better have answers," Caleb said, stepping inside. The air grew cooler as they entered, the faint scent of moss and earth filling his lungs. The interior of the shrine was dimly lit, shafts of sunlight piercing through cracks in the ceiling. Rows of stone tablets lined the walls, each etched with the same intricate symbols as the doorway. Yavara moved toward the tablets, her fingers tracing the symbols as if they spoke directly to her. Caleb hung back, his eyes scanning the room for anything that looked valuable or dangerous. "These tablets hold records of our clan's history," Yavara said, her voice filled with quiet awe. "If there is truth to be found, it will be here." "Great," Caleb said, leaning against a nearby pillar. "How long's that gonna take?" She shot him a look, half amused, half exasperated. "Patience is a virtue, human." "Not one of mine," Caleb replied, but he stepped back and let her work. Minutes turned into an hour as Ivara studied the tablets, her golden eyes darting across the symbols with intense focus. Caleb paced the room, his nerves on edge. The quiet of the shrine felt oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through the cracks. Finally, Yavara straightened, her expression grim. "I found it." "What?" Caleb asked, moving to her side. She pointed to a particular tablet, its symbols more angular and aggressive than the others. "This speaks of betrayal, of an elder who sought to wield the life stream for their own gain. They cast out anyone who opposed them." Caleb frowned. "So you're saying one of your elders framed you to cover their tracks?" Ivara nodded, her jaw tightening. "Yes, and this tablet suggests there is more evidence hidden within the clan's archives." "Then we need to get to those archives," Caleb said, "and fast. Those bounty hunters aren't going to stop looking for us." Ivana's gaze met his, determination burning in her golden eyes. "Then we must go, together." "Together?" Caleb echoed, his lips twitching into a faint smile. For better or worse, they were in this now, and there was no turning back. The moonless night cloaked the desert in darkness as Caleb and Yavara trudged across the open expanse, their silhouettes mere shadows against the jagged horizon. The wind whipped around them, carrying with it a biting chill and the faint scent of ozone. In the distance, the glow of a Sarian settlement shimmered like a mirage, its pale light a beacon both inviting and foreboding. "Is the place?" Caleb asked, his voice low but steady as his eyes scanned the horizon. Yavara nodded, her golden eyes catching the faint light. "It is. The elder resides within that enclave. If he still holds sway over the others, we will find him there." "And if he doesn't?" Caleb asked, his tone edged with skepticism. "Then we find whoever does," Ivara replied simply, her voice tinged with a quiet resolve that Caleb had come to recognize as her strength. "The truth must be revealed." Caleb adjusted the strap of his pack and tightened his grip on his blaster. The idea of walking into a Sarian stronghold with little more than a half-baked plan and an alien woman whose people had exiled her wasn't exactly appealing. But the fire in Ivara's gaze told him they didn't have much choice. If they wanted answers and a shot at clearing her name, they had to act now. As they drew closer, the details of the enclave came into view. A cluster of domed structures, their surfaces smooth and iridescent, rose from the desert floor like a natural extension of the landscape. Guard towers dotted the perimeter, their watchful sentries silhouetted against the faint glow of distant stars. Caleb's stomach tightened. This wasn't going to be easy. "Do they know we're coming?" Caleb asked, keeping his voice low. "They will not expect us," Ivara said, her expression calm but her posture tense. "But they will not welcome us either." "Great," Caleb muttered, "just how I like my missions. Impossible." Yara glanced at him, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "You have faced worse, I think." "But it doesn't mean I enjoy it," Caleb shot back, though he couldn't help but feel a flicker of admiration for her unshakable determination. They reached the outskirts of the enclave without incident, slipping through the shadows with practiced ease. Caleb kept his blaster drawn, his senses on high alert as they crept toward one of the lesser-guarded entry points. Ivara moved silently beside him, her lithe form blending seamlessly with the darkness. When they reached the entrance, a narrow archway carved into the rock, Caleb held up a hand, signaling for Ivara to wait. He peered around the corner, his sharp eyes scanning the area for any signs of movement. 2 guards stood at the far end of the corridor, their postures relaxed, but their weapons within easy reach. "2 guards," Caleb whispered, glancing at Ivara. "Any chance you've got some mystical Sarian trick up your sleeve to deal with them?" Ivara arched an eyebrow. "We do not rely on tricks." "Figures," Caleb muttered. "All right, let's do this the old-fashioned way." Before Vyara could protest, Caleb slipped into the corridor, moving with the silent precision of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of not being seen. He crept up behind the first guard, his movements fluid and deliberate. With a swift practice motion, he struck, knocking the guard unconscious before the man even had a chance to react. The second guard turned, his eyes widening in alarm. Before he could raise his weapon, Yuvara was upon him. She moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic, her movements a blend of fluidity and precision. Her hand darted out, striking a pressure point that sent the guard crumpling to the ground. Caleb stared at her, his eyebrows raised. "You said you don't rely on tricks." Ivara straightened, smoothing her tunic with an air of calm confidence. "That was not a trick. That was skill." "Remind me not to get on your bad side," Caleb muttered, stepping over the unconscious guards. The interior of the enclave was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, the walls lined with glowing Sarian symbols that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly light. Caleb followed Ivara as she navigated the maze with an ease that spoke of familiarity, her steps quick and purposeful. "Where are we headed?" Caleb asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "To the Elder's chamber," Ivara replied. "If he is here, he will have answers." "And if he's not?" Caleb pressed. Ivara hesitated for the briefest moment before replying. "Then we will find someone who does." Her tone left no room for argument, and Caleb didn't press further. He could see the weight of her resolve, the determination that drove her forward despite the danger they faced. As they rounded a corner, the corridor opened into a large chamber, its walls adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to shift and shimmer in the dim light. At the center of the room stood a figure, a tall, imposing Sarian man draped in flowing robes of deep blue. His silver hair gleamed in the soft light, and his golden eyes narrowed as they fell on Ivara. "Igara," the elder said, his voice a low, resonant growl. "You dare to return here?" "I seek the truth," Ivara replied, her voice steady despite the venom in his tone. "You accused me of betrayal, but I know now that the true betrayer walks among us." The elder's expression darkened. "You know nothing. Your exile was just." "Was it?" Ivara challenged, stepping forward. "Or was it a convenient way to silence me?" The tension in the room crackled like a live wire. Caleb's hand tightened on his blaster, his instincts screaming at him to stay alert. The elder's gaze shifted to him, his eyes narrowing. "And who is this?" the elder demanded. "A human? You bring an outsider into our sacred halls?" "Caleb is my ally," Ivara said firmly. "He seeks the truth, as do I." The elder sneered. "A human has no place here. And you, Yvara, have no right to speak of truth. You are an exile, a pariah." "An exile framed by your lies?" Yvara shot back, her voice rising. "The records in the shrine speak of betrayal, of an elder who sought to manipulate the life stream for his own gain." The elder stiffened, his composure cracking for the briefest moment. It was enough to confirm Caleb's suspicions. He stepped forward, his blaster aimed squarely at the elder. "Care to explain that?" Caleb asked, his voice cool and steady. The elder's golden eyes flicked between them, his expression a mask of controlled fury. "You are meddling in affairs you cannot begin to understand, human." "Try me," Caleb said, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. For a moment silence filled the chamber, the air thick with tension. Then the elder's lips curled into a cold smile. "You think you can expose me?" he said, his tone mocking. "You are nothing but a lost soul clinging to a dying cause." "We'll see about that," Ivara said, her voice unwavering. "The truth will come to light, and when it does, your lies will crumble." As her words hung in the air, Caleb felt a surge of admiration for her courage. Despite everything she had endured, Yvara stood tall, unshaken. And in that moment, he realized that this was no longer just her fight. It was theirs. Together they would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The Elder's Hall stood at the center of the Sarian enclave, its towering spires gleaming like liquid silver against the early morning sky. The structure emanated an almost palpable energy, as if the life stream itself thrummed within its walls. Caleb and Yvara approached the entrance under heavy guard, the silent figures surrounding them armed with ceremonial spears and sharp, watchful eyes. Caleb's grip on his blaster tightened, though he didn't dare draw it. These weren't the ragtag bounty hunters they had evaded in the desert. These were Sarian warriors, and they moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Yvara walked beside him, her back straight, her head held high. Despite the weight of the moment, she radiated calm strength. "You sure about this?" Caleb muttered under his breath. "I must be," Yvara replied softly, her gaze fixed on the entrance ahead. "The elders will not listen to words alone. We must show them the strength of our bond." Caleb hesitated. "And by bond you mean?" She glanced at him, her golden eyes steady. "Trust, connection, and commitment. The life stream tests not only our will but the depth of our unity." Unity. Caleb swallowed hard. He wasn't sure how unified they were. Sure, they'd fought side by side, escaped death together, and unearthed fragments of a conspiracy. But a ritual to prove their bond. That was another level entirely. The great doors to the hall groaned open, revealing an expansive chamber bathed in a soft golden light. The walls were lined with intricate carvings that shimmered and shifted like flowing water, each symbol alive with the energy of the life stream. At the far end of the chamber, seated upon elevated thrones carved from gleaming crystal, were the Sarian elders. There were 6 of them, their robes a cascade of blues and silvers that marked their rank and authority. Their expressions ranged from cold detachment to open disdain as they regarded Caleb and Yvara. At the center sat the High Elder, an imposing figure with silver hair and eyes that seemed to pierce through to Caleb's very soul. Yvara of the Sarian clan, the High Elder intoned, his voice reverberating through the chamber like a low drum beat. "You return to us in defiance of your exile." "I return to seek justice," Yvara said, her voice clear and unwavering. "I was cast out on false charges, framed by those who sought to exploit the life stream for their own gain." The High Elder's gaze shifted to Caleb, his expression darkening. "And you bring a human, an outsider with no understanding of our ways." Caleb bristled but kept his tone even. "I understand enough to know that someone here framed her. I've seen the evidence." "Evidence means little without conviction," another elder interjected, his tone sharp. Words are fleeting. The life stream does not lie. Yvara stepped forward. Then let it speak, she said. I invoke the trial of the bond. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The High Elder leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You understand the gravity of what you ask? I do, Yvara said firmly. Let the life stream judge the strength of our bond. If we are found unworthy, I will accept my fate. Caleb's pulse quickened. Hold on a second, he said, glancing at Yvara. You sure about this? I'm not exactly fluent in cosmic energy rituals. She turned to him, her expression softening. I trust you, Caleb. That is all that matters. Her words stirred something deep within him. For someone who had spent most of his life looking out for himself, the idea of someone trusting him so completely was both terrifying and exhilarating. He nodded, his resolve hardening. All right, he said, let's do this. The elders led them to a circular chamber beneath the hall, its walls adorned with glowing symbols that pulsed in time with an unseen rhythm. At the center of the room was a pedestal made of crystalline stone, its surface etched with intricate patterns that shimmered with energy. This is the crucible of unity, the High Elder explained. The trial will test the depth of your bond. If it is true, the life stream will reveal its strength. If it is false, it will shatter under the strain. No pressure, Caleb muttered, earning a faint smile from Yvara. The elders took their places around the room, their hands raised as they began to chant in a low, resonant tone. The symbols on the walls brightened, casting the chamber in a golden glow. The air grew thick with energy, the life stream's presence tangible and electric. Yvara stepped onto the pedestal, motioning for Caleb to join her. He hesitated for only a moment before stepping up beside her. The instant his feet touched the crystalline surface, a surge of warmth coursed through him, as if the very ground beneath him was alive. Place your hands upon the stone, the High Elder commanded. Caleb and Yvara obeyed, their fingers brushing against the cool, smooth surface of the pedestal. The moment their hands made contact, the patterns beneath them flared to life, sending tendrils of light spiraling upward to encircle them. The energy was overwhelming, a rush of sensations that defied explanation. Caleb felt Yvara's presence like a heartbeat against his own, her emotions fear, hope, determination blending with his in a way that left him breathless. He could feel her trust in him, her belief that they could face this together. And to his surprise, he realized he believed it too. The light around them grew brighter, forming a cocoon that pulsed with the rhythm of the life stream. The chanting of the elders grew louder, their voices melding with the energy that filled the chamber. Focus, Yvara whispered, her voice a steady anchor amidst the chaos. Let the life stream guide you. Caleb closed his eyes, letting himself be drawn into the current of energy. Images flashed before him, fragments of their journey together. Yvara chained and vulnerable in the desert, the moments of trust forged in the heat of battle, her quiet strength, her unwavering determination, her vulnerability. When he opened his eyes, he saw her staring back at him, her golden eyes filled with emotion. And in that moment he knew, this wasn't just about proving a bond to the elders. It was about them, what they had built, what they had become. I'm with you, he said, his voice firm. The light around them flared one final time, then faded, leaving the chamber in silence. Caleb and Yvara stood on the pedestal, their hands still pressed to the stone, their bond undeniable. The High Elder stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The life stream has spoken, he said finally. Your bond is true. A ripple of shock passed through the gathered elders, but none dared to challenge the verdict. The High Elder's gaze softened, his tone shifting. Your exile is lifted, Yvara. And you, human Caleb, you have shown us the strength of unity. Relief washed over Caleb, but it was Yvara's expression that struck him most. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked free, truly free. As they left the chamber, Caleb felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known he was missing. They had proven their bond, not just to the elders, but to themselves. And as Yvara slipped her hand into his, he knew that their journey was far from over. It was only just beginning. The enclave was silent, as though the entire Syrian settlement held its collective breath. The verdict had been passed, the ritual completed, and the bond between Caleb and Yvara declared true. For Caleb, the weight of the moment pressed on him with surprising gravity, though he couldn't deny the flicker of pride burning in his chest. They had done it. Against all odds, they had proven themselves. Yvara walked beside him, her golden eyes focused on the path ahead as the enclave's inhabitants parted to let them pass. Some watched with awe, others with lingering skepticism, but none dared challenge the decree of the life stream. She held her head high, her movements purposeful yet graceful. Caleb couldn't help but admire her strength. She had stood against her people, endured their condemnation, and emerged unbroken. As they neared the outskirts of the enclave, Caleb leaned closer to her. "So that was intense," he said, attempting to inject a note of levity into the heavy silence. Yvara turned her gaze to him, her expression softening. "It was necessary," she said. "The life stream does not test lightly. It seeks the truth within us." "Well," Caleb said, scratching the back of his neck, "guess it found some. Not every day I get a cosmic thumbs up for whatever it is we've got." She smiled faintly, a rare but growing expression he had come to treasure. "What we have is trust, unity, and that is enough." For the first time in a long while, Caleb felt grounded not in a place, but in a connection. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. He had spent so much of his life running, avoiding entanglements, but here he was, bound to someone who not only needed him but believed in him. They paused at the edge of the enclave, where the canyon walls opened up to the vast desert beyond. The High Elder and several of the other leaders approached, their movements deliberate, their expressions unreadable. Caleb tensed, instinctively resting a hand on his blaster, but Yvara touched his arm, her fingers light but grounding. "Peace, Caleb," she said softly. "They bring no harm." The High Elder stopped before them, his gaze sweeping over Yvara with an unreadable expression. "You have proven your bond," he said. "The life stream has spoken, and its will is absolute. Your exile is lifted. You are free to return to the clan." Yvara inclined her head, her voice calm but firm. "I thank you, High Elder, but my path does not end here." The Elder's brow furrowed. "You would refuse your place among us?" "I do not refuse," Yvara said, "but neither can I remain. There is much to be done, truths to uncover, connections to build. The life stream has shown me that unity extends beyond our people. Caleb and I have forged something new, something that transcends tradition. I cannot turn my back on that." The High Elder regarded her in silence, his expression unreadable. Then, to Caleb's surprise, he nodded. "Perhaps the life stream has more to teach us than we have understood. Go, Yvara of the Sarian. Walk your path." Yvara bowed her head in respect. "Thank you." The Elder's gaze shifted to Caleb, his tone neutral but carrying an undercurrent of acknowledgement. "Human, you have shown great resilience and honor. The bond you share with Yvara has changed more than her fate. It has given us a glimpse of what might yet be possible. Walk with care." Caleb inclined his head, unsure of what to say. Thanks, I'll try not to blow it." As they left the enclave behind, the desert stretched out before them, vast and untamed. The suns hung low in the sky, casting the dunes in a fiery glow. Caleb glanced at Yvara, who walked with a new lightness to her step, as though the weight of the world had finally lifted from her shoulders. "So," Caleb said, breaking the silence, "where to now? Got any cosmic roadmaps in that life stream of yours?" Yvara smiled, a genuine, radiant expression that made Caleb's heart skip a beat. "The life stream does not give directions," she said. "It offers guidance. But I do know this, our journey is not over. There is still much to learn, to explore." "Sounds like a lot of work," Caleb said, though his tone was teasing. "It will be," Yvara replied, her eyes gleaming with determination. "But we are stronger together." Caleb let her words sink in as they walked, the desert wind tugging at his jacket and carrying away the echoes of the past. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in his life he wasn't afraid of it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As the suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Caleb and Yvara set up camp among the dunes. The fire crackled softly, its light casting dancing shadows on the sand. They sat side by side, the silence between them companionable. "I never asked," Caleb said, his voice breaking the quiet. "What does the life stream feel like? To you, I mean." Yvara considered his question, her expression thoughtful. "It is connection," she said finally. "A sense of belonging to something greater. It is like a river, carrying us all, flowing through us and beyond us." Caleb nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the flames. "Sounds nice," he said. "Guess I've been floating solo for too long." "You are not alone now," Yvara said, her voice gentle but firm. "The life stream flows through you too. I have seen it." He glanced at her, surprised. Me. I thought humans didn't have whatever it is you Sarians do. She smiled, her golden eyes warm. Perhaps not in the same way, but you have touched it, Caleb. You have felt it, even if you do not yet understand it. Caleb leaned back, his gaze shifting to the stars above. Maybe. Or maybe I've just got you to keep me grounded. Yara's smile deepened, and for a moment the vastness of the desert seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them and the connection they had forged. As the fire burned low, Caleb found himself wondering about the path ahead. There were still questions to answer, mysteries to unravel, but for now, he was content to sit beside Yvara, to share this moment of peace in a world that rarely offered it. Yvara, he said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. Yes, she replied, her gaze meeting his. Thanks, for trusting me, for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself. Her expression softened, and she reached out, her hand brushing against his. You are worthy of trust, Caleb, and together we are stronger. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that came from somewhere deep inside. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged not to a place, but to a purpose, to her. As the stars wheeled overhead and the desert wind sang its quiet song, Caleb and Yvara sat together, their bond unshaken and their journey just beginning.